She's your friendly neighborhood mercenary. We're talking about Silva Sablanova, aka Silver Sable. Hi, I'm Nando, and in these videos I take a character from Marvel Comics. I talk about their history, their power set, their personality, and I give you some reading recommendations. And this is all because this week this character is being introduced into the collectible card game Marvel Snap. But most of the video is just me talking about the character. Also, this is going to be one of those videos where my cat is on my lap, and we'll see how that goes. Speaking of cats, so Silver Sable. A sable, this is something I learned, not a cat. I didn't think it was a cat. I knew it was an animal, but then I realized recently that it's just like a word that means black. So I was like, oh, did I just totally mess that up? It seems like a sable is also kind of a stoat, which makes sense because Silver Sable, especially in the beginning of her appearances, tended to wear a lot of big like mink coats, what you would expect would be like made of sables perhaps. But this is one of those characters whose superhero name just comes from the fact that it is pretty much her name. She is the Blackguard Boltagon of superhero mercenaries. So Silver Sable, you may be familiar with her. I'm sure she was in the animated series. Most people probably recognize her from the DLC for the first Spider-Man Insomniac PS4 game, where she played a pretty big role as the, friend slash enemy slash anti-hero, antagonist, whatever, person that kind of helped Spider-Man fight Hammerhead. Now, in the comics, I would say she's got more going on than that, but I think overall, that's a good start. She's from an Eastern European nation, which we'll get to. She owns a mercenary company and takes jobs, sometimes good, sometimes bad. She's usually aligned with Spider-Man, and she usually more or less does the right thing. She's not a bad guy for sure, although sometimes she's been on bad guys' teams and she's had to, assassinate world leaders or things like that. But especially as this character has existed and kind of evolved, she's become more of an ally. We've learned a lot about her moral code. So she first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 265, written by Tom DeFalco, with art by Ron Frenz, Joseph Rubinstein, Bob Sharon, and Phil Felix. And this is my first of my important issues for Silver Sable. It's a pretty concise origin for the character, gives you a good idea for what she does and what her relationship with Spider-Man is like, specifically like how she feels about Spider-Man. So the Silver Sable story. So she's from a place called Symkaria. This is another fictional Eastern European nation, much like in the MCU, we've got Sokovia, and then in Marvel Comics, very famously, we have Latveria. Latveria, I would say, feels closer to like a Romania, Transylvania kind of country. I would imagine that's probably what they're going for with Sokovia as well. And I'm not sure, like a lot of these Balkan nations get kind of mixed up in the in Marvel Comics, but this one one of the things we know about Symkaria is it does border Latveria. It's one of the countries that borders Latveria. It's not a particularly well-run country. I believe there's like a history of coups, and it's not a particularly rich country. Like they do okay. A lot of it is based on what Silver Sable does, which we'll get to. And it's not a country like Wakanda where it's like a fictional, they have all the technology and everybody lives in like the future. It's very much probably what you would expect a country like this to be written as in the 80s or even today. So again, this country is called Symkaria. Silva is a Symkarian princess. Her father is involved in something called the Wild Pack, which when it was started was a group of mercenaries that got together and started hunting down escaped Nazis. Now, over time, this just became a group of very well-trained mercenaries. The problem for Silva is they didn't kill all the Nazis, so some of them came back and got revenge by killing Silva's mother. This is a very formative event for Silva. Also turned her hair white. It was such a traumatic experience, and not all at once, but it like started becoming white after this. And after this incident, her father's basically like, we gotta train you to be a super spy because people are coming after you. I'm not gonna last forever. And then somebody needs to take up the leadership of the Wild Pack because it is like an internationally recognized, like ultra cool mercenary group that can hunt down Nazis. So like we gotta keep that going. So Silva goes through all kinds of training, has no superpowers. She's very skilled, she's very intelligent. She has a specific weapon, I think it's called a Saija. It's like a 3-sided throwing star, but even that, you don't see that much anymore. She has what I think is pretty much the Black Widow kit plus some bigger guns. So like she can turn invisible sometimes. Sometimes she has like special electrical charges and things like that. I do think Silver Sable does oscillate wildly between spy and mercenary, whereas sometimes her job is sneaking around and like espionage, whereas sometimes it's her and her guys, storming someone, surrounding them with guns. Now I would say she registers originally as a villain for Spider-Man because Spider-Man is trying to track down the Fox, a jewel thief, and she is also trying to track this person down, and Spider-Man kind of gets in her way, originally makes this more difficult, but then Spider-Man is able to let the Fox get away while keeping the jewels that he stole and giving them back to Silva. So this is the first moment in their relationship where Silva's like, oh, this guy's okay. Like, I respect him. And that's, I'd say, the most important thing here. There is a little bit of romance, and this is something that never fully goes anywhere. I would say interesting. Like, obviously there's characters like Gwen Stacy, and then there's Mary Jane, and there's Felicia Hardy, Black Cat, and a couple of other characters that have come and gone. But I think because that Silver Sable never seemed to stick around enough to make a dent in those relationships. Like, I think if Silver Sable was a big player, as big of a player as Black Cat, there would have come some time, and maybe this happened and I forgot it because I haven't read every Spider-Man comic, where like the writers wanted to break up Spider-Man and Mary Jane because they were bored, and they ended up having Silver Sable in the comics. So like, you know, let's make this a thing. There's one point very late where Sable's basically like, Spider-Man, I know we're about to die, and I just want to say and then before that he cuts her off and he's like, I have a girlfriend. He doesn't say that, but like that's what he, you know, putting that information out there, and she's like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, I think she's got some feelings, but that's not reciprocated in a way that's interesting. But I would say Silver Sable at the beginning of her career, she's bumping into Spider-Man, doing missions, chasing after villains that Spider-Man is also chasing after. You know, sometimes she seems more ruthless. She's willing to kill in ways that Spider-Man is not, but also she has a very strict moral code. She's got a really strong will. She's got lots of honor. I'm trying to think of another character that this is like, because these characters totally exist. I'm pretty sure Batman has one. There's a Batman villain who is like a mercenary or something who just wants to kill, and Batman won't let them. And I mean, I guess you could kind of say it's kind of like the Talia relationship, but she's more of like a murderer who like just does want to kill, whereas I feel like with Silver Sable, it's very much a job. She wants money, and you know, she will kill a person for money, and if you don't have money, she won't do it. And she makes a lot of money. Like Symkaria, this entire nation, is more or less funded by the Wild Pack because they're able to charge so much for their mercenary skills. They are able to produce the GDP of this country, and it's not a humongous country, but still it's pretty impressive. A lot of the time she's going after supervillains. I want to say one of the things I'm going to focus on here, she goes after the supervillain, the Jack-o'-lantern, who was a player in Spider-Man comics then, sometimes is now. I do think that this character is so preposterous. Like, if you see this guy from a distance in a comic and you just go, oh, I guess that's Green Goblin was probably dressed like that then, because like that guy has a pumpkin head, but Green Goblin has pumpkin bombs. There's no way someone would show up, same color scheme, also standing on a thing with a pumpkin head, and not expect to get sued by the Green Goblin. Also, that thing that he's standing on, and I never realized this until I actually read a character say it, but it's not super clear what it's doing. It is I think it's called like a pogo pad or something. So he's not flying. That is not a glider. It is just bouncing around. So it's really like, I mean, listen, Jack-o'-lantern's a character, so I'm sure there's people that love Jack-o'-lantern, but if I saw him in a book, I'd be like, is that the invincible version of Green Goblin or something? But whatever. One of the things that Silver Sable does that is cool, I would say, because she doesn't have flexible morals, she's very strong-willed, but, you know, she's a mercenary, so sometimes that means you have to work with unsavory characters. Silver Sable has had a series, like a Wild Pack series, that features different Spider-Man villains and just Marvel Comics villains, I guess, or anti-heroes. Most notably, Sandman is one of her great allies. She pretty quickly, I want to say, like, recognized that like Sandman's not so bad. He was somewhat reformed at the time, and she was able to draft him. Also Paladin, Battlestar, and a couple of other characters. And this would be like, there was a run called Silver Sable and the Wild Pack, which I would love to read, but they've refused to put on the Marvel Unlimited app. I'm assuming it's these guys just going around and, you know, capturing terrorists and stuff. But yeah, so that's the Wild Pack. I want to really focus on two modern Silver Sable stories because I think they're so interesting. First one, Ends of the Earth. So this is a Spider-Man event where Dr. Octopus is like, I can solve global warming, everybody, let me do it. All the nations of the world are like, no, you're bad guys. Like, listen, I'm going to die, so I have to do something really important. Let me launch my satellites into the Earth, and then everything will be fine. And they really don't want him to do this, but he's basically like, I'm going to do it whether you let me or not. And this Dr. Octopus is a bad guy. Like, Spider-Man knows this. But Dr. Octopus organizes the Sinister Six, which is the traditional Sinister Six. I want to say Electro, Rhino, Sandman, himself, obviously, Mysterio, oh, and Chameleon. So those 6 fight the Avengers, whatever. For a lot of this comic, it is just Silver Sable, Black Widow, and Spider-Man. And like I said, Silver Sable and Black Widow, similar characters, very similar skill set, but you know, they take apart this organization one by one, figuring out different ways to fight the different members of the Sinister Six, including Sandman, who Silver Sable's like, hey, you used to be cool. And he's like, I know, but I'm not cool anymore. And they managed to beat him by finding the single grain of sand that is like his personality and being and stuff, and trapping that, which I think is a really clever way to kill and like disable the Sandman, because it can't be that his brain is just in all the sand, right? There's one piece of sand, and all the sand that is connected to is in play. But in this book, Silver Sable seemed to die. She sacrifices herself because Spider-Man needs to go stop Dr. Octopus. Rhino is basically holding her head underwater. He's like, if you want to save her, you have to fight me, and you don't have enough time to get to Dr. Octopus. And she says, Spider-Man, it's fine, I'm good, you go. And Spider-Man's very upset about this, makes him really angry. Another character who we'll talk about next week, Madam Web, shows up, and this is the Julia Carpenter version, not the Cassandra Lane version. Like later, when Spider-Man is just really upset because Silver Sable is his friend, this honorable person who he, went down fighting, sacrificed herself to save the world. Spider-Man didn't want to leave anybody behind, but like he had to. Madam Web shows up, and she's like, hey, Spider-Man, I've got some news. First of all, it's not your fault that Silver Sable died. Spider-Man's like, I don't care. And then Madam Web says, well, actually, I phrased that weird. Silver Sable's not dead. Like, that is Arrested Development Doctor level. Do not give the news in that way. Could have started that, hey, Spider-Man, real quick, Silver Sable's alive. But yeah, turned out she snuck away from the Rhino. So this character is still alive and has appeared recently. And I'll say, I want to pick one Ends of the Earth story. I would pick a Wild Pack book because those are good introductions to Silver Sable. Unfortunately, because they're not on the Marvel Unlimited app, I was not able to read them. So I'll say my second important issue for Silver Sable is in the Ends of the Earth story. It's not the beginning of it, and it's not the end where she dies. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 685. It's written by Dan Slott with art by Humberto Ramos, Victor Olazaba, Edgar Delgado, and VC's Joe Caramagna. And I only picked this one because it's one of the most memorable ones, because this is the one where Silver Sable's like, Spider-Man, and then he cuts her off, and she doesn't get to confess that she loves him, or I don't know, wants to kiss him or something. But one thing I think it's interesting in this issue, Spider-Man and everybody's fighting Mysterio. Mysterio pretends to blow up the whole country of Symkaria, and Silver Sable gets really, really, really upset. And then Spider-Man's like, nah, it's cool. And I do think that is an interesting development for this character. If Symkaria was destroyed, this country that does not matter in terms of Marvel Comics, like nobody else is from there. You probably had not heard of it before now. What does Silver Sable do? There's no Wild Pack. Like if she is, this single operator working in New York City now, like what do her and Spider-Man, has their relationship developed? I think that could be interesting. It's revealed that that's a Mysterio illusion and Symkaria is fine. But the last thing I want to talk about with Silver Sable, easily the most important, the most interesting as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so very recently in the X-Men comics, the X-Men were hunted to near extinction by the group Orchis, which was a group of technological robot scientist types that all got together. People like Nimrod and Master Mold, like all the Sentinel adjacent characters, not Bastion because he wasn't around then, but they all, well, maybe he may have showed up. I don't know. I haven't read all those. So at that point, the X-Men went from being on Krakoa, as safe as they'd ever been, to having to just run pretty much and start new lives, create a resistance and marry Iron Man or something. Or in Kurt Wagner's case, he just pretended to be a new Spider-Man. And I think it's so clever. And part of it is that the Sentinels can detect who's a mutant, but because of something that happened that I don't want to fully get into because it does kind of surprise. But because of that, Kurt does not appear to be a mutant, so people just think he's like another Spider character. Puts together a sick costume that I love, and yeah, just goes to New York, fights crime, tries to reconcile the fact that the citizens of the world hate mutants, but he wants to save them. But usually there's that, they hate and fear them, but they also know that they're being saved by the X-Men. Whereas in this case, he's pretending not even to be an X-Man. So, how does that make him feel? Mystique's also going wild during this story, causing all kinds of trouble. This is a round where where we'll find out that Mystique and Destiny actually had Nightcrawler together. Azazel was not involved, and it's an interesting retcon that a lot of people have been kind of asking for a while. But the fun part of the story is the bad guy is the Vulture, who is working for Orcus, and he has all kinds of extra technology, and he's able to mind control some superheroes, other mutants to work for him like Dagger, but he also hires Silver Sable and the Wild Pack because he needs help hunting down these other mutants. And Silver Sable spends maybe 10 minutes with Nightcrawler. He takes off his mask in front of her, and her reaction is basically like, oh my god, that man is gorgeous. I can't even form sentences. This like fully just breaks Silver Sable. And listen, it's Nightcrawler. That's part of his deal. He's very, very handsome and charming. But what I love about this is like Nightcrawler's had a couple of different romances. Like I do think people, if you just kind of know Nightcrawler as he's kind of a priest, and you know, if you've seen like X-Men 2 and some of the other cartoons, you wouldn't necessarily get the sense that Nightcrawler is like a stud, and he is found lots of interesting relationships, some or you know, flirtations that never really went anywhere, but some like totally went somewhere. And the most recent one, unless there's one that came out since then, was with Silver Sable, because after this these guys started hooking up on the regular, which I think is fun because Silver Sable is like hunting him, like she's actively trying to catch him, but she does say like, listen, when I'm on the clock, I'm Silver Sable, I'm in the Wild Pack, I'm gonna get you, but when I'm not, I can do whatever I want. I'm basically just like a free person in New York City, and you know what I'm gonna spend my time doing? Having sex with Nightcrawler on this roof. And she does, and it's pretty cool. I like this. Like, I've never thought about this pairing, obviously, because one of the things with mutants is the X-Men tend to date other X-Men or other mutants. Every so often, you know, someone will stumble out and like Kitty will date Star-Lord or something like that. But for the most part, you have like, you know, your Jeans and your Scotts, your Emmas and your Scotts, your Rogues and your Gambits, stuff like that. I actually kind of like the idea of a non-mutant dating a mutant. Like, it does seem like Kurt has feelings for her, and it definitely feels like she has feelings for him. I'd like to have that relationship develop. You know, Kurt teleports over to Symkaria. Sometimes he can do a much longer teleport, but like, they just spends time there, and those two have a relationship. So I'd like to see what the outside perspective on mutants, like, what happens next time there's a big mutant genocide? Like, how does Sable deal with the fact that Nightcrawler is part of the next big mutant genocide, whenever that happens in like a year? So I think that's interesting. I also just think, I don't know, I like that he has this effect on her, so much so that she's like, is your mutant power to seduce me? And he's like, not technically, but it does happen. So, you know, just whatever happens, I guess. She eventually, you know, not like betrays the Wild Pack, but when she realizes A, she doesn't need this money, and B, like the Vulture's evil and doing stupid bad guy stuff, she works with Nightcrawler and Mystique to, you know, do the right thing, because this character is more or less heroic at this point. Like, currently in history, I would be surprised to see Silver Sable on the wrong side of a, you know, heroes and villains situation. So I would say that is important issue number 3, not because it's important in the grand scheme of like, this is the issue that changed Silver Sable's life forever, but it might in the future if this relationship continues. But I do just think this Nightcrawler Silver Sable thing is very fun. So I'm going to say my third important issue for understanding Silver Sable is Uncanny Spider-Man number 2, is by Cy Spurrier, who I love. Cy Spurrier is so good. With art by Lee Gabbert, Matt Milla, and VC's Joe Caramagna. Like I said, if you want a more complete version of this character's history, definitely find those Wild Pack books, figure out where they are, and read them, because they are a big part of her history. And I do think like the Nazi hunting part of her past is interesting, but I'm looking at like where this character is now. I think she's become much more like, the parts of her history that I find interesting, the parts where she bumps into Spider-Man in the middle of a thing, or Nightcrawler or whatever. So yeah, as far as powers, like I said, no powers, very smart, good diplomat, deals with like diplomacy with Doom, which is tough because they share a border with Latveria, and they, like, I think it's similar to Doom in that she's incredibly loyal to Symkaria, to the point where like, if she has to align with Doom to protect both their nations, she will. But on the other hand, like, she knows he's, you know, an egomaniacal warlord, but like once a year they have dinner. One other thing that's interesting about Silver Sable, like her look, she's either dressed in a very tactical, like, you know, spy outfit that you'd see on someone like Nick Fury, but just all white, or like very, very fancy fur coats and stuff like that. This character has never been in a live action movie as far as I can tell. They were going to make, it's one of the, back when Sony was like just saying names of movies, and they still do this, but the first time they were doing this, and just saying names of movies that would never get made. One of them was a movie called Silver and Black, which was going to be a team up with Silver Sable and Black Cat, which originally I was like, that's crazy. But now having seen like Madam Web, I'm like, nah, that could work better than, like, Madam Web didn't work because like, what do these characters have in common? Is it fun to see them working together? Black Cat and Silver Sable could maybe have an interesting dynamic of like master thief with no scruples mixed with a strong-willed mercenary, and maybe they both have to go do a mission to find somebody who stole something from both of them. I don't know what the movie was going to be, but you know, it could have worked. It didn't end up happening. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Silver Sable in something in the future, because Spider-Man does not have very many villains that are women. Like, it's Black Cat, it's Beetle, it's Screwball, and some of those guys, but like having her show up as this femme fatale character, I think is interesting. As far as friendships, you know, close with Spider-Man, now close with Nightcrawler, close with Sandman, and other characters like Paladin, Battlestar that have been part of the Wild Pack. A, you know, difficult diplomatic relationship with Doom, but one that is more or less stable. She was married to a character named the Foreigner, who is another kind of super spy character, but he's more or less out of the picture now. In Marvel Snap, Silver Sable is a 1 cost, 1 power with the on-reveal ability, steal 2 power from the top card of your opponent's deck. So right off the bat, like, this is a great card. This is one of the better 1-drops. It fits into a lot of decks like Cerebro 3, which is fun. I would imagine what they're going for lore-wise is that she is a mercenary, so she, you know, harms someone and then enriches herself, right? Like, kind of like how Val wasn't exactly this, but Val had like she's part Hydra, she's part Shield, so she gets you a card, but then it gets a little hurt. I think that's what they're going for here. Like, if you have like Rhino, she will injure Rhino and then collect money from it, is probably what they're going for there. It's a card archetype that, like, I don't think there is any consistency on, because it's Cassandra Nova does something kind of similar to this, Yondu does something kind of similar to this, Cable does something kind of similar to this. Like, there's a couple of cards that do affect other cards in your opponent's deck. You know, Copycat, you could say she has a similar effect on an opponent's deck, but I do think just like the fact that she's a 1 cost means Silver Sable is going to play into bounce decks and things like that. It could make a big difference, especially if you're just playing around like Kamertage. You can take 4 power off a card. That's awesome. Does she work well with any of these other characters? Doesn't work well with Spider-Man, doesn't work well with Nightcrawler. It's fun that Spider-Man and Nightcrawler work well together though. Like, Nightcrawler can slot into the Spider-Man, you know, everybody's moving around archetype. Kind of gets beat by Luke Cage, works well with Ajax, I no interesting synergy with Sandman. In fact, if she's part of a bounce deck, she's not going to work well with Sandman. No synergy with Black Cat. I'm not surprised. I think this is going to be a cool card though. I'm excited for her. Also, great art, very proud. Good job, Marvel Snap. I do think the Eduardo Mello, Ryan Kincaid, like, the base art is good. The solid, like, you know, Silver Sable. But then you've got a Pixel that is fine. A Ryan Gonzalez that I think is very good. I do like, that's one thing about Silver Sable's costume. It does have this cross. Like, it's, without it, I do think it would just be kind of nothing. Like, there's not a lot going on, but it does help to break up the outfit. But I do think the Ryan Gonzalez is cool. And then you got the Spotlight Cash, which is obviously great. It's another Inyuk Lee variant. And then for the, what is probably a reasonable price of 700 gold, you've got the Nicola Sismasija variant, which, you know, I think is solid. So releasing cards with a lot of variants, I think that's great. I think we'll see some of that in the future. I think most of the cards that are released this season will come with at least 1 variant you can get in the store that is okay to good. I think there's going to be, is it Luke Claretti is the person that makes these? Yeah, I think she's going to be part of an album. It's going to be a very nice album. But yeah, I'm excited for Silver Sable. I think she's a cool character. Next week, oh my god, we're Madam Web. It's webbing time, as they say. I'm very excited to talk about that character and her incredibly thin comic history that they managed to stretch into an hour and 40-minute long movie, and also managed to miss a lot of the important and fun stuff. These go up early on Nebula, so if you enjoy watching them and you don't have Nebula, I would check that out. You get to see them a week early. You can know about the character before all your friends in your Discord group ask, hey, who the hell is Silver Sable? Besides that, follow, subscribe wherever you can. I'm Nando V Movies on all the platforms. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.